Hey, everybody, you're on Groomed.Connect. And today we have a special guest because Brian is MIA. He's missing in action. He's actually down in Kansas City tonight. We're filming this or recording this on Wednesday night because I'm going on vacation. I couldn't do it this weekend. So Brian was gone today. So we asked my old friend Steve Hays to come on. Steve, what's going on?
It's great to be here. Thanks, sir. I'm Brian's missing is my gain. So I'm glad you had me come on here. I love what you guys are doing. Hope Brian has a good time away. I hope your vacation is good. Where are you going on your vacation?
We're going up to the mountains of Colorado. We're going with my wife's
Ooh,
family, brothers and sisters, just siblings, no parents. Siblings and their kids, and we're taking our stepdaughter, my stepdaughter. And so, yeah, it's gonna be a good time.
sounds
We
fun.
rented a Airbnb, and so we're gonna do some hiking and the like. So,
Sounds fun.
yeah,
I like it.
yeah. I like
Just send
Colorado
me the
just a little bit.
address. I'll stop on by.
Come on over. Steve, tell it before we get into this. You're in the middle of getting your book edited. We
Yeah.
had you on before. We talked about your book.
Yeah.
What's happening?
It's good news. It's been sent to the copy editor. And that's the first round of editing. That's where, you know, someone takes all my ideas and my thoughts and they kind of make sense of them.
Good
She even
luck.
said, originally, she said, well, it's a little bit all over the place. And I said, that's kind of what happens when it takes you 2 years to write it. But we're 25 chapters in. Now I'm sending her, she's sending me homework. I'm sending stuff back. So it's went to the next phase, which is excellent. It's taken a while to get here. I still got more writing I want to do, but I'll be writing forever. We just figured we better get this thing out while it's still hot. And I think that the topic we're talking about is still very hot. In fact, that's one reason why I enjoy coming and talking this podcast with you, because it's a lot of what the book really is about. And so that's kind of where we're at. And it's going to take some work from here on out. But I think this is where it gets really. At first, I felt kind of bad when she said, "Well, you're kind of all over the place," and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. It takes." She said, "No, that's what you want in your first draft," and that's exactly what you told me, Mike. You said, "Steve, just write. Don't think. Just write. Write what's in your heart. Right." And she said, "I want." She says a lot of times when I edit people's books, I want passion, and a lot of times that's not there. She says, but your book definitely has a lot of passion, has a lot of heart, because I care. I care about the wounded and the sick. That was your segue into Ezekiel 34, because Ezekiel 34 is one of my it's a very, I don't know if I want to say one of my favorite passages, because it's one of my most potent passages in the Bible. We don't preach about that much, because, well, you'll see why when we talk about it today. But it's
Yeah, so let me read it. So we're
yeah,
on so those of you that are tuning in tonight, maybe didn't see last week's, we're on a little bit of a series. We probably will end it next week, but um, it's really about Ezekiel chapter 34. In my book, Groomed, at the end of the book, after I went through all my trauma and stuff, at home at Boston, and then stuff with the church, I talked about shepherding and about chapter 34, and Ezekiel really had an impact on me as a youth pastor. I don't youth pastor anymore, but I speak in schools. But it had an impact on me because it showed me the right way. I was watching a lot of stuff that we're seeing now, the neglect and, all the abuse, the using religious language to leverage power over people and to, manipulate them and stuff. And so that's what Ezekiel's talking about. And so I want to read, we didn't do this last week. So I want to read Ezekiel chapter 34, just the first few verses here.
and before we do, Mike, can you explain to those who might not know who Ezekiel is? I mean, those that have been raised in church probably understand Ezekiel, or have read the Bible much probably understand Ezekiel. But for those that don't know who in the puke is Ezekiel, can you give us a little bit of rundown on that first?
He was a used car salesman. And no, I'm just kidding. No, he was one of the prophets. Well, you explain it, Steve-O.
Well, he was just back in the day. He was one of the guys that God revealed things to and said, "The people that are representing me represent me poorly." And they called him prophets back then, but he was just a godly man that God would share things with him. And then he would go to the leaders, the spiritual leaders of the day, and he'd say, "This is what's going on, and this is what God is saying, and we need to fix this." And that's where this is coming from right here in chapter 34.
Yeah, so go Steve, why don't you go ahead and read Ezekiel chapter 34, verses 1 through 10.
Would love to. This is a message from the Lord came to me, Ezekiel speaking here. The Lord said, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Tell them, the Lord and King says, how terrible it will be for you, shepherds of Israel. You only take care of yourselves. You should take good care of your flocks. Instead, you eat the butter. You dress yourselves with the wool. You kill the finest animals, but you do not take care of your flocks. You have not made the weak ones in the flock stronger. You have not healed the sick. You have not bandaged those who are wounded. You have not brought back those who have wandered away. You have not searched for the lost. When you ruled over them, you were mean to them. You treated them badly. So they were scattered because they did not have a shepherd. They became food for all of the wild animals. My sheep wandered all over the mountains and high hills. They were scattered over the whole earth. No one searched for them. No one, oh, that gets me. No one looked for them. Shepherds, listen to the Lord's message. He says, my flock does not have a shepherd. Many of my sheep have been stolen. They have become food for all the wild animals. My shepherds did not care for my sheep. They did not even search for them. Instead, they only took care of themselves. And that is just as sure as I am alive, announces the Lord King. You want me to go to verse 10?
Yep.
Shepherds, listen to the Lord's message. The Lord and King says, I am against the shepherds. I will hold them responsible for my flock. I will stop them from taking care of the flock. Then they will not be able to feed themselves anymore. I will save my flock from their mouths. My sheep will no longer be food for them.
Wow.
Wow.
And that, I mean, to me, Steve, that's what's happening today. Like, that's what's happening is God is saying
Agreed.
enough is
Agreed.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we think that, oh, that was back in the Bible days. That was hundreds of years, thousands of years ago, right? So it's not true today. No, it's the same thing going on today. Not every pastor, not every leader is bad, obviously, but there were a lot of them in that time that God just said, enough, enough. You're not taking care of my people, and Mike and I, we live in allegory and metaphor. We love word pictures, all that type of stuff. But right here, if you haven't caught it yet, he's talking about people. He's talking about the people are the sheep, and the people that are supposed to take care of them are the shepherds. And that's really what the pastors are today. Pastor really comes from that word shepherd. And we've made it into this big thing where you've got to go to a Bible college and you've got to get a degree and you've got to have a pastor, have a church to be a pastor. But that's not in the Bible. It's only mentioned a few times in the Bible. And it basically means to shepherd the sheep, to take care of my people. And when I went to school, we learned a lot about how to preach and do a lot of things, but they didn't do a lot of talking about what do you do with the wounded? What do you do with the sick? How do you we're not here to set up a pastor isn't here to set up a Sunday service. A pastor is here to take care of the people that come across their path, that God brings across their path. And that's a potent passage of scripture for me to read for myself too. It's a good thing that we should read on the regular to go, am I doing that? Am I taking care of the wounded or am I ignoring them? Are
Right.
they just get under my skin
So
or do I really care?
we want to break down today. Last week we talked about the week. We talked about what the church's responsibility to strengthen the weak and what that meant. And it was a really good podcast. This week we want to talk more about the sick and the wounded. And there is a distinction. They're not the same. And we'll make that distinction in a minute. But I just want to comment before we get into that on that verse at the end where it says they became food for all the wild animals. And because of what I do for a living, you see that. You see the lack of shepherding that goes on with young people. And I just a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, a girl came up to me and she said, "Can I talk to you?" And I've talked about this before, and I don't remember when I did this on the podcast, but this girl said, um, my dad sold me to his best friend for $168 for the night so he could get money from meth. If that isn't a picture of what a wild animal, like the wild animals,
Right.
right? The desperate people that are just really messed up and not shepherded. They become food. You know what I mean? Like this girl became food for a wild animal. Her
Yeah.
stepdad, I think it was a stepdad that was you selling her basically. And I didn't, Steve, I didn't have a piece of paper on me, but I had a pen on me, and I wrote $168 on my hand because I didn't want to forget that number, because it was like, my God, like and I've heard other stories too that just really underscore the lack of shepherding. And so let's go into what a shepherd's responsibility is to take care of um the weak, to take care of the weak. I'm sorry, to take care of the wounded and the sick. So we're going to give a few points here. First of all, the sick, right? There's a difference between the sick and the wounded. The sick is kind of internal, right? So if we're going to use metaphors and that kind of thing, I think today the sick would mean, people that struggle internally, right? The battles inside that person, like anxiety, depression, addiction, burnout, shame, fear, spiritual confusion, chronic loneliness, performance mentality, like I'm not good enough unless I'm performing. Those are all inside things, right? That people struggle with. What churches often do wrong in these situations is they'll say stuff like, "Well, just pray more," or "You need to have more faith," or
Right.
read your Bible more, or make people feel like they're struggling equals spiritual failure. Like, you're struggling, so you must be doing something wrong, right? And sometimes people just struggle, right? And
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
healthy shepherds do, and this is what we want to kind of normalize this. We want to help people see this, is they normalize asking for help. They're like, it's okay to not be okay. A good pastor will say, "Hey, it's okay to struggle. You're not wrong for struggling." That's where a lot of people deal with stuff, because they can't even tell you that they're struggling, that they're sick on the inside, or they've got something, bound up inside that they're confused about. Because if they do go to somebody, a spiritual leader, they feel like they're not good enough for them, right? It's almost like you have to clean up to get cleaned up, which is stupid, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
remove shame. A good pastor will remove the shame. They'll walk beside people. They'll encourage counseling when it's appropriate. Create recovery ministries, right? Create these ministries for people to have community around these things, around, not that you want to dwell in it and get in the muck and mire of it all, but sometimes being in a community where people have a shared, you know uh ailment, or a shared, problem, that can really help, right? So we need to create ministry and create space for people like that, people that are struggling with that kind of stuff. Teach grace without, removing responsibility, right? Yeah, you do want to challenge people to get better, but you also want to give them space, to do that. Like, and this is a good question here. Does your church feel like a hospital, or is it like a stage, right? And so, Steve, what are your thoughts on that, on the sick?
Um, well, when you said earlier about they're basically food for the wild animals. Life has a way of being wild. I mean, if you don't believe that, then go out in the woods tonight and try sleeping overnight without a tent and see how wild it is out there. Life is wild, right? And all those things you talked about, the sickness, the anxiety, the hatred, the depression, the discouragement, the a panic, all that stuff, that is some scary stuff. And when I'm going through that, you know what I need? I need someone in my life to say it's going to be okay. That's what a shepherd does, right? If there's not, we need to know that we belong, that we matter, that we're the whole point of having a group, whether it's a church or a hospital, or it's a place where you can go and get better. And that's the point of church, is that when you the church is a body of believers, people that believe that God is good and he's good all the time. They say that all the time in church, God is good all the time. It's a place where we need to come and feel like it's okay to be sick. It's a place where I want to go when I'm sick, because when I'm struggling, and someone else says it's going to be okay, or someone else says, "Steve, tell me about that." Sometimes we have to sit in the darkness with somebody instead of just turning the light on. And we want to do that. We want to give a real quick pat answer, like, well, just that's why we say just pray more, because we don't really want to sit and listen to that person. But the job of a shepherd is to take care of the sheep and to protect the sheep from all those things that happen to us. And when the shepherd isn't there, then panic runs amok. When the shepherd isn't there, that discouragement turns into depression, turns into hopelessness. When the shepherd isn't there, that fear turns into anxiety. And then we make all sorts of crazy. That's what I liked about your concept about, showing grace with but not removing responsibility, because sometimes the choices I make are causing some of these things. And so when you really care about someone, you walk alongside them and say, let's talk about this, and what have you been doing, and listen. And I to me, that's what we're supposed to be doing. If we call ourselves followers of God, that's what God did. So if we're going to follow him, we need to follow him to where the sick are. We need to follow him to where the people are hurting. And the people, sometimes we see them as, I don't know, it feels like we see them as a interruption in the day. Like, I've got to get stuff done. I don't have time to listen to your problems. But listening to the problems, in fact, and I'll turn it over to you after, but you said something, and you put out a blog or something, but you emailed it to me, and this was so good. You said, "At the end of the day, I don't think God is going to ask pastors how many campuses they built, how many books they sold, or how many followers they accumulated. I think he may ask something much simpler. Who did you strengthen? Who did you heal? Who did you bind up? Who became healthier because you were their shepherd?" Mike, that's it right there. That's the point. That's everything right there.
Yeah, that's the heart of a shepherd is not to fix people, it's to walk through their pain. I love, and there's different interpretations of this, but when Jesus knew he was gonna heal Lazarus, but he still cried with the girls, you know what I mean? He still felt their pain. They lost their brother. Martha and Mary were grieving, and he grieved with them. It's the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept, right? And he wept, but he also knew, like, in 5 minutes from now, this is gonna turn into a party, right?
Yeah.
And
No,
but he
I want to interrupt right there. That's so good, Mike. He
Yeah,
wept with them, even though he would have said, "Hey, just don't cry. Let me fix it. I don't want you to cry." No, he allowed them to mourn. He allowed
right,
them to cry. He knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, and he still sat there and bawled with them.
yeah.
Jesus wept.
Yeah, it's such a picture of compassion, and again, even though he knew what was about to happen, but it wasn't like he was trying to save the day. He was trying to walk through their pain with them, and I think that's what good shepherds do. Jesus couldn't help himself. He's a shepherd, so he had to. He walked through it with them, and I think that's what I think the world needs. And then there's a time for teaching. There's a time for restoration, and putting some principles together to walk through some of this stuff. But at the beginning, when someone's hurting like that, I don't need your quick fix. I need you to shut up and
Yeah,
and just let me talk and let me
yeah,
process. And
yeah,
I mean, I think that's important. All right, so that's the sick. And so we want to talk about, it says in Ezekiel, it says to bind up the wounded, and that's different, right? Sick and wounded are different, right? Internally, sick is internal. Wound is something that happens to you, right? The injury came from the outside. It wasn't supposed to happen. You were, normal things happen. You go along your day, and all of a sudden, boom, you get sexually abused, divorce, betrayal, rejection, bullying, spiritual abuse, church hurt, manipulation, family trauma. There's, a myriad of things that go on in people's lives that are wounds, and they're deep wounds. And some things are really hard to get over. And I'm looking at this list going, geez, like, this, a lot of this is my childhood and beyond, right? And there was a wounds, betrayal and manipulation. I was in a cult, basically, in a sense. I mean, and was manipulated. And so there's a difference between, the sick and the wounded. And when the wounded come in, sometimes it's overwhelming for churches, to take care of wounded people, and sometimes I look in church. I don't go to church that much anymore, but once in a while when I do go, I look around and I wonder, like, who's wounded right now? What do they walk in with? I
love
was
that.
a couple of years ago when I was going to church, I was at they put me in they gave me a job at being a greeter. So it actually is a great job for me. I really liked it. But I noticed that there was a guy coming in. He get out of his car. I watched him. He got out of his car and he was hitting on a vape the whole way. Like he was just hitting on this vape all the way in the parking lot. And he was late for church. So nobody really, was in the parking lot. It was just him. And he was he was hitting on this vape. And as soon as he got to the door, he put the vape away and blew out his last puff of, whatever that stuff is. And it was just so funny. And not funny, but I was thinking, this guy is ready to walk into church and he's gotta hit the vape before he comes in because of the stress in his life. What's he
Yeah,
walking in with,
yeah,
And a lot of times we look at, the reaction to these things, spiritual abuse, church hurt, sexual abuse, divorce, betrayal, rejection, bullying, manipulation, family trauma. The reaction from people is behavior issues, right? Rebellion or, being short with somebody, you losing your temper, being very angry, not trusting people. So there's a behavior. So the church goes, we need to change the behavior. We got to get this behavior changed because, we got these Christians that got to look out like our little trophies in a trophy case and they got to represent our church, represent me as a pastor. So we got to clean this behavior up. And the people feel that. They feel that they have to change instead of looking at the belief behind the behavior. So the belief might be, well, I don't feel very good about myself because this person rejected me. I was betrayed. My wife betrayed me, and now we got a divorce, and so I don't like me. That's the so the the behavior is I'm angry or whatever, and we want to change the behavior. And I just think churches need to stop and get to the belief, which is going to take time. What do you say, Steve O Devo?
oh, I love that. When there's a wound, one of the translations of the Bible puts it this way: to bind up the brokenhearted. In fact, the Bible is full of that statement: to bind up the brokenhearted, to bind up the wounded. When you go to the hospital because you have a wound, they don't put numbing cream on the outside of your skin so you don't feel the pain. That's what you're talking about. Like, let's
Right.
take care of how did you word it? The behavior. Let's fix the behavior. Well, the behavior is a natural reaction of what's going on inside. Now we got to fix what's inside. And when there's a wound, you don't just rub numbing cream on it and the pain goes away. Well, the wound is not unless you bind it up, unless you bandage it, unless you put that ointment on that bandage and then you wrap it firm or fairly tight around the arm or wherever that wound is, the body will basically heal itself if you bind it up. A broken heart can be healed if it's bound by somebody, if it's wrapped and hugged by somebody, if it's listened to by somebody. But if you leave the wound go, it turns gangrenous, right? It gets ugly. And then pretty soon that spreads. It spreads like mold, and now everyone around you is catching the whole we were called to bind up those that are and that happens when you listen to somebody, when you say it's gonna be okay, when you cry with them, when you that binds up their so what are we doing to bind up the broken heart? If we just ignore the broken heart and try to fix the behavior, it's not going to go away. It's only going to get worse. And then something big often happens or some decision is made that affects an awful lot of people, not just that person at that point many times. And we were called to bind up, especially if we call ourselves leaders or
Right.
if we're pastors, we are called to bind up. But I will say this too, that our churches are full of a lot of pastors. Now, there might be only one that went to a Bible college, to a university, and he got their degree hanging on a wall, and they have the office in the church building. But a pastor, I don't care. A pastor is a person who shepherds people, not a person that has a degree on the wall. And so our churches are full of people that have always bound up the brokenhearted. I do the same thing, Mike. It touched my heart when you said I would look around and say, I wonder how many people are broken in here. I'd sit when I was going to Bible college, I'd sit on the side of the highway and I would just bawl for hours. And I'd look at all the cars and I wondered how many of them were hurting, how many of them were struggling, how many of them were wounded, how many of them were on their last breath, how many of them were just like they have no hope anymore. That's what I wanted to do too. That's why Ezekiel 34 meant so much to me too. It shouldn't surprise me that we both went through it because our lives kind of pat on each other a lot. But yeah, that's what I think about the wounded. I think that that's what we're called to do is to, it never goes wrong to listen to somebody, to help somebody, to bind up. the wounded. So I love your delineation too between the sick. That's more of an internal thing where a wound is something that has happened to me. And some things are our fault. A lot of things are not our fault. And if we don't have anybody that will bind up the wounds, it can get really, really ugly and affect an awful lot of people. But if we just take the time to, how many times have we bound somebody's wound and it changed everything for them?
Yeah.
Mike, you've done that for me many times. And I've done that for you. We've sat in golf carts. We've sat around coffee shops. We've sat in church pews when everyone else is gone. We sat at camp in the cafeteria when everyone else is gone. All the lights are off, and we're t- stealing food out of the kitchen, right? But we bound each other's
Don't say that.
wounds.
Don't tell
You
her.
know,
That's we'll edit that out.
we bound each other's wounds. We
Yeah,
cared for each other.
yeah,
And
yeah,
Mike, that's one reason why we have such a good friendship. I know for my part, it's because all the times you listened to me and you bound my wounds. I remember one time when I just felt like a terrible parent because parenting is hard. And I remember sitting in the golf cart and you knew, I don't think I even said anything to you. And you looked at me and said, because you're my friend, so you could do this. And you said, Steve, are you kidding me? You're a great parent. And I just bawled right there. And that's what it looks like, in my opinion, to bind somebody's wounds is to listen to them, tell them it's going to be okay, or just put your arm on their shoulder or stare in their eyes as they're crying and bawling and bind up the wounded.
yeah, and I think sometimes, we've seen this, I've seen this too, or in churches where pastors will want you to forgive the person that hurt you right away, right? And sometimes that gets weird because forgiveness is a process, and then I don't think they even teach forgiveness the right way because
Yeah.
sometimes they teach forgiveness meaning that you have to reconcile with that person, and reconciliation and forgiveness are two
Two
different
different
things.
things. Yeah.
Forgiveness to me is about you freeing yourself from the burden of this person and the hurt they did by forgiving them. It's more for you than it is, for them. Reconciliation requires two people sitting down and working out, what happened. And I noticed that a lot of people don't really want to do that. I've got people in my life that I've forgiven them. Even Jeannie, I talk about her a lot on the podcast. I've definitely forgiven her, but we're not reconciled because there's a there's a difference, right? You have to
Yeah.
sit down and talk about the offense and what happened and work it out and come to a compromise. And I think a lot of times pastors want you to forgive because they don't want to. They just think that's the magic pill, right?
Yeah.
Here, take this. Here's forgiveness, blah, and they well, that isn't gonna I mean, that's a process, and
Yeah.
that's a real intimate thing between you and God. I've forgiven people where it's taken me some really intimate moments with God and people to get there, right? So, it's just rushing it through kind of fast food forgiveness is almost like an insult to people,
Yeah.
and to me, it's just laziness. It's spiritual and emotional laziness, and yeah. Healing takes
Yeah.
time, and that's the next point here,
Yeah.
is healing takes time. One of the biggest mistakes churches make is trying to fix people too quickly, right? You should get over this by now. You gotta move on, stop living in the past. Healing isn't measured by speed, it's healed, it's measured by restoration. And so talk about that a little bit, like, what does restoration actually really look like?
Well, you said it a while back. You said, I'm not interested in fixing people. And I
Right.
think oftentimes we want to fix people because we want we don't want justice, we want peace and quiet. Don't interrupt my life, don't interrupt my service, don't interrupt. I can't do so. As a parent, we do the same thing as a parent. We don't want to really get down to the bottom of this because he said, she said, just because I said so, that's why. And we just, we want that. I was a part of a church long, long time ago, and there was a spiritual leader there that was just beat the tar out of me, man, emotionally, not physically, but and I remember talking to someone that was very close to me and knew the whole situation, and I said, "I don't know what to do." And every time I open up, and this is getting to the restoration part, every time I'd open up and forgive that person and open up to them, then they would sooner or later they would go right back to what they did before. They would repeat the same, and this person said this line to me. They said, "If the mailman keeps running over your feet, get off the curb." right? So if, I walk out of the house today and the neighbor says, "Hey, Steve, come here a second," so I walk over to my neighbor's house and he slaps me and I'm like, "What'd you do that for?" "Well, I'm sorry, I've got a slapping problem. I slap people. I don't mean it. I'm really sorry. Please forgive me." I'm like, "Okay, I forgive you, but that's weird." The next day, "Steve, come here." I forget all about it. I walk over there. He slaps me. "What'd you do that for?" "I'm sorry." At some point, I got to stop going over to my neighbor's house. And
Yeah,
I'm the same way. There's people in my life that I've forgiven, but I don't need to revisit that and keep going. I like how we need to forgive, but restoration is kind of God's perspective, and that does take time. And restoration that needs to be said so much more. It's not forgiveness, it's completely different. You need forgiveness to get restoration. Um, and you sent me a song that someone wrote for you, and the lyrics were talking about how I'm forgiving not because I'm forgiving you, but because I hatred is a loaded gun, and when you spin it, it turns on you. And so it talked about how, "Watch me, I'm letting go of this." And that's called forgiveness. Restoration, it does take time. And that's why the Bible says that love is patient. And if we love somebody, if we're a shepherd, you got to be patient with sheep because sheep can be stupid. I do stupid things. Sometimes I make the same mistakes the same time, or I commit the same sins, right? I need someone that's going to be patient with me. When someone is patient with me, I know that they love me. And when someone tells me, "Steve, it's okay. It's okay. You're going to be all right." So I don't know if that answered your question or not. I just love the fact that you made a delineation again between sick and wounded. Now you made a delineation between forgiving and restoration. And
or
restoration
reconciliation.
oftentimes
Reconciliation.
reconciliation. There you go. There you go. Those are two different words too. Reconciliation. And sometimes to get good reconciliation, you need a third party. You need somebody else in there to help you with that many times. And if you just go to that person and they don't want to change, they don't want to, or they don't see the error of their ways or how they hurt you, reconciliation is gonna happen just with the 2 of you. So, you
Right.
need help. It takes time, and sometimes you need someone to go with you. Forgiveness is the deal. That's the real deal right there. Reconciliation can come, but it's a separate thing.
Yeah. And I think churches need to create spaces where
I like
people
that.
can have, creating spaces means, you know, it's really like culture. You set the culture of, hey, this is a safe place. You can be real. You can have a bad day. We're not going to freak out because you manifest some kind of
Yeah,
behavior. And again, I like the idea of having groups. I love my church in Rockford did divorce recovery workshop, and I thought that's great because people that go through I went through a divorce, and it's horrible, and they say that I've heard different people, have different analogies of this or different explanations of this, but when a man goes through a divorce, and it's just as bad for women too, so I'm not trying to, be, sexist, but basically, because 'cause I'm a man, I read the stat that said, it takes 7 years before
wow.
you you really get over that, and that's probably I look back at my process, and it was about the 7th year that I began to kinda get my head
Wow.
above the water a little bit, and again, you were a great, great friend during all that time, but it was nuts, and it was I went to what I did, Steve, I went to the shepherds. I I didn't go, and I've taught you, like you said earlier, it's not just because you have you do have a a title, and you did go to college, but I
Right,
don't
right.
see you that way. I see you as my friend who's the shepherd who I could
Yeah.
go to and go, "Hey, this sucks right now, and I'm not doing good, and I drank, and I was mad, and I cursed the church," and you never I told you this the other day, you were the most like Jesus anybody has been to me personally,
Wow.
and you were a shepherd, and you knew that I wasn't gonna stay there. You weren't trying to fix me and trying to you just let me talk, and then little by little, I mean, I'm not gonna say I'm completely healed. I'm still a little nuts, but I've come a long way, and it's because of shepherding. I mean, I went to some counseling, that's true too, and that's the other thing is I like the church I went to in Kearney, Nebraska, under Jeff and Kim Baker. They're awesome. They have a counseling department in the church that you have to pay for because and I think they do some programs where people do get it free, but people, there is a cost, but these are professionals. These are people that went to college, got a degree in counseling, and they're qualified. And I love that, and when I was writing Groomed, that's where I went. I went and sat with, one of the counselors, like 13 sessions while I was writing the book, because I was like, "This is heavy stuff." I haven't talked about this stuff in Boston for a long time, so it was great. It was great because they shepherded me through some acute care. I didn't need to just go to an altar at the end of a service, and that's
And
healing
pray
too,
and
that
cry.
can be,
Yeah, right.
but I needed specific healing. I needed to talk about these specific
Yes.
things that happened to me with somebody that was professional that could walk me through some of this. Even though I've walked through some of it before, I needed that. And it was a qualified person that gave me great advice,
Yeah.
and I needed that. Not You don't need that all the time, but I specifically needed that at the time. And I love that my church at the time created that space for me and other people to take advantage of that, to take that, to do that. So
I remember when I was going through anxiety, panic attacks, very scary. It scared the crud out of me. It was so scary. And this pastor saw that in me. He said, "Steve, why don't you come on board with us?" And what got me through that was all the counsel that I got from pastors that were on staff, that's what they did. And I was so lucky that I was able to be a part of that because it was like every day someone had to speak into my life and tell me it was going to be okay and tell me what the real truth was. But I will say this too, that the people that meant the most to me, the times that meant the most, that were the most comforting to me, where I got the most healing, was when they shared something they had done. Right, instead of trying to correct me, they just almost kinda laughed like, "Steve, you should see what I did. Let me tell you about the time I did this." And at that point, I was like, "Oh, you screwed up too?" And sometimes that's the best thing that we can do, is to ask questions, see how they're doing, and don't be afraid to talk about the times that we failed, because it's really funny, because I could really be struggling with something, but the moment I find out you're struggling with it, I'm like, "You too?" And I feel so much better now. Well, I feel better because you were struggling, but there's some truth to that, because I'm not alone, and that's what it means to bind up the brokenhearted and to heal the sick. And when you bind up the brokenhearted, the body heals itself. And
yeah.
I think we got to stop trying to fix people, and we just need to start binding up the broken hearts. Start listening and watch the healing come naturally. That's what love does. Love heals. It just does.
Yeah,
And
and I like what Ezekiel, where it goes at the end of this, at that segment. It's not the end of the chapter, but the end of I think I don't remember what verse it is, but when God says, I'm going to be the shepherd now. If you're
yeah,
not gonna do it, shepherds,
I'm
I'm gonna
gonna
take
do it.
over. And
Yeah,
and that's what's kinda happening now. And that gives me some I mean, part of me criticizes the church, like, "Okay, dummies, like, if you're not gonna do this, he's gonna take over and you're not gonna have a job, right? Or your job's gonna
right.
be so obsolete and so ridiculous that nobody's gonna go to you," right?
Yeah,
But the other part of it is you take comfort in that, like, "Okay, if these guys are gonna mess up, God's not just like, you didn't put the whole thing on them. He's gonna come in and be the shepherd." And I
it's
and
pretty
that
cool.
and I think it's in, where is it? I think it's Isaiah. I forget exactly where it is. No, wait a minute. Maybe it's Psalms 34. Psalms 34, where God says, "I will be a father to the
For the
fatherless." If the father
fatherless.
is gonna drop the ball, I'm picking up the ball. God wants to use people to be good fathers and good shepherds and good friends, but if that's not gonna happen, God doesn't leave you hanging. And that's the great thing about God, is that He's gonna He's gonna meet your needs. He's gonna find a way to, to
Yeah.
be there. I This is a dumb thing, but I gave somebody a picture a long time ago, somebody I trusted, and then I found out that person, like, basically threw the picture away. But this was the only picture of me when I was 10 years old, right? It was we didn't take a lot of pictures back in the day, and we were poor, and, this is a really good picture of me, and I don't know, I gave it to this person thinking that she would cherish it, and when then she started talking about me behind my back and all that, you can kinda guess who I'm talking about. But basically, when I went back to her and said, "Hey, can I have that picture back?" She lost it. Oh, she threw it away. And it really broke my heart because that was the only picture of me. Well, just like 3 weeks ago, my cousin texts me that picture. Her uncle had a copy. Her dad, my uncle, had a copy of it, and I got it now. And I know that's
And
dumb.
that's an example of binding up the brokenhearted. That's what God did. He
Yeah,
bound up your broken heart because
yeah,
that wasn't just a picture for you. It represented so
right.
much more, and God made sure you got it just
I'll throw
God's
that
pretty
picture
stinking
on there
cool.
too. I'll throw it on
Yeah,
here. So
yeah.
it's cool. It's me like me with the guitar, and so yeah, I'm cute. Look how good looking I am. Anyways, all right. So Steve, thank you for
Yeah.
coming on and filling the shoes of one Brian May.
Not
Um,
too easy to fill those shoes, but thanks
he's
for
great.
having
I
me come
love
on. I
Brian.
really appreciated it.
I love Brian. The best. I love the podcast. Totally love the podcast. But the before and after of the podcast with Brian, we should record them because they're hilarious. Like, we get worked up, and he says some things he wouldn't say on camera, but, no, it's good, and but you mentioned at the beginning of this that there was a blog, and we're trying to put a blog out every week, so there will be a blog in the description in this, and it's a blog I wrote through AI. Kind of did AI and just me, my thoughts on this. But we put that out so you have something to read and something to kind of go by. But next week we will be talking about the strays and the lost, and so um, tune in,
Can I
everybody.
say one more thing, Mike?
Groomed.Connect. Yes, Steve-O.
I
Close
forgot
us
about
up, buddy. Close us up.
something that just came to my attention not too long ago, and I think it fits well. And since I'm not going to be here for the rest of Ezekiel 34, I want to share it with you. I mean, we grew up. There was the last book of the Bible has all these churches that Paul had a vision about, and he writes about. And one of them is called the Church of Laodicea. It was a Laodicea was a city, and it was the believers that were in that city. Um, and he said that I would rather have you, God says that he would rather have you hot or cold, because if you're lukewarm, I'll spew you out of my mouth. Now, our whole life, we thought that that meant God said, I'd rather have you be an atheist. I'd rather have you hate me. I'd rather have you be hot or cold than lukewarm. And you got to be on fire for God. But cold is important too, right? In this summer, it's been hot. Cold drinks are very powerful. The people that lived in that part of the world, see, we are in America. We translated that a little bit differently. What that really means is this: the church Laodicea in that city, they didn't really have a water source. They had two neighboring towns that each had a water source. One were hot springs, and the other town were like cold mineral springs. Now, so they'd have to get their water from these towns. When you get a hot spring, you want to soak in that. When you're wounded, what do you want to do? You sit in a hot tub. It helps you out, right? If it took too long to get that water to Laodicea, you're expecting this hot water to. You know what's worse? Sitting in a cold or warm a hot tub that's just tepid, that doesn't do anything. There's no refreshing there at all. That's what it's talking about there. On the other hand, the cool, cold water of the other neighboring town, village, whatever it was, if it took too long to get there, then that turned warm. And when you're expecting an ice cold drink, ice cold water, and it's warm, you go to the store, you get ice in when it's hot out. So what I think God was really trying to say there was that, listen, no matter where you go, be refreshing, be warm for those that need the comfort of a warm bath, of a hot tub. Bring healing that way. Or those that are weary and worn out and beat up and over hot and extended, and they need a cool refreshing, then be that to them. And I think what God wants us to do is God wants us to be refreshing. He doesn't want us to be on fire, super zealous, whatever the case. Bottom line is, God wants us to be refreshing to the people that are around us, and I think that that's what Ezekiel 34 is really all about.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Have you heard about the cold plunges people are doing now? Where
Yeah,
they get
crazy.
into I would never do that. I'm
I will
sorry,
be
but
I
I'd probably have a cardiac arrest if I
Oh, it's
like
good for you, they say. Good. You just jump on
yeah,
in
keep
there then.
going. Yeah. I'll get in the hot tub at the Holiday Inn.
Now
Woo!
that one I can do. Yes, sir.
All right, Steve-O, good to see you, man. We'll talk to you soon. Everybody, tune in next week when Brian will wear a wig. I'm predicting. Just kidding. All right.
I
See
can
you
feel
later.
it. I can feel it.